welcome back to our podcast where we're joined again with somebody that's just like us. Our podcast has the tagline People Just Like Us, and today I've got Laura with me, somebody else who's just like us, who's going to share a bit about where she's at, who she is, and actually what's important to her. And again, if that's something that interests you and you want to be part of our podcast, then please do drop us an email at inquiries@healingfortheheart.co.uk and we'll slot you into one of our recording sessions, and we'll hear what you have to say too. So any things that are important to you, if you work for an organisation that you want to talk about how what you do impacts mental health and wellbeing, then we'd love to hear from you. But today it's Laura. So welcome to our podcast, Laura. It's lovely to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Why don't you tell us a wee bit about yourself and how you've got to wherever it is you are just now?
Oh, that's a big story, Shona.
Well, we've probably got a 20-minute podcast.
Okay, so I will condense it. Yes. So I'm Laura, and I am actually the new minister at White Inch Church in Glasgow. I spent 4 years training. I completely changed my life to go into training for ministry, because before that I worked for a large retailer, big, much loved retailer in this country, and I worked in internal communications, and I was focusing on a lot about creating a culture, creating culture within the staff, so that they would buy into, be engaged, to sell, and, really be engaged in the whole company ethos.
Yeah.
And so I found this really exciting. I loved it. I really loved it whenever we moved over to the digital platform as well, because that was like pioneering, and we were able to, just try to reach people in different ways, which was fantastic. And so, as you can probably tell, I really loved that job, and I loved actually the lifestyle as well in it, because I would travel, and down to, I worked in Hamilton and Glasgow, and I would travel to Manchester, I would travel to London, and there was so many great opportunities. But God kept, he was calling me, so I changed my life quite radically to follow that calling, and so I'm now a minister, but I'm keeping a hand in with my interest in digital, all digital communications, because I also still, as part of my training, I had worked with Sanctuary First, which is an online church, and so I still do things with them, because I really do feel part of that community as well. So yes, and I have a son, he's 22, and I'm a granny. People might not, think that when they see me, but I'm a granny to Alfie, who's 4, and Teddy, who's 7 months. So and I'm mad about animals. I've got horses and dogs and cats. And moving to the city from the countryside, that's been a big change in the last 4 months.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, on the back end of a pandemic as well.
Yes.
So lots going on then as far as life is concerned.
Yes.
Lots going on then as far as changes in terms of job, changes you've had them all just kind of in the last wee while. So how do you stay centred? How do you actually stay grounded yourself? How do you look after your own well-being?
So that's where my animals come in. So as because it's a wee bit different in the summer, because with the horses, like in the winter time, autumn, winter, spring, you have to be there every day, so you're mucking out, and there's something actually, it seems strange, but I love mucking out, because it's like, whatever you're holding on to, you're physically actually mucking it out and getting rid of it. Just being with the horses and their energy, because when you're with horses, you have to be fully present in the moment. As soon as you step inside the stable or their field, whatever their space is, you've got to be fully in the moment with them. Otherwise they end up being quite naughty, you know. So because they can feel what's coming from you.
Yeah.
So that is that's what keeps me, you know, going to the stables every day, walking my dogs, you know, sitting, you know, with the dogs at night time and the cats, just being with them. That's what.
Yeah.
And I also find that when I'm out, you know, when I'm at the stables, that's like when I feel really close to God. So, you know, I'm able to, you know, it's just being in nature actually just makes me feel close to God.
Yep, that's really, really interesting. There must be something to do with that connection with the animals as well. And I know, so I don't know very much about it, so but I've read about equine therapy and stuff like that, and the horse has been able to pick up what's going on and then respond to whatever is going on. And that sounds as if that really is a real thing then.
Oh, aye, definitely is. Actually, in the future, that's where I would see myself, like my ministry kind of evolving to.
Not a ministry to horses.
No, not to horses. No, not just to, but like to working with people and horses that need to kind of rehab together.
Wow.
That's where I would see. I've had this kind of vision for a long time. I even put it on my application form when I applied, like for ministry, and nobody said to me, "Oh no, that sounds daft." You know, it's so I see it that, and every so often God will keep that within me. You know, so as I know that ultimately that's where I'm heading.
Yep. So, you know, you've mentioned God several times, so faith's obviously important to you.
Yes.
So how does, what's that intersection between faith and your well-being then? How does that sit? Because for some people, actually faith knocks their well-being off. Well, not faith, but religion maybe knocks their well-being off. So how does that faith thing sit with you with your well-being?
So for me, it, like we all have like seasons in life that are tougher than others. You know, that's just life. And for me, I'm not expecting God to magically fix things, especially whenever quite often what you're going through involves other people, you know. And so for me, it's like I know like that God's with me. So he might not be able to magically solve things for me, but he's there, like holding me and giving me courage, especially like, you know, sometimes you don't feel like getting up, you know, but it's like, no, I'm getting up. And just sometimes it does feel like you're living on a prayer, but when you look back, you know, you can, it's like, oh, God really carried me there, you know.
Yep. And that connection thing's interesting. Sometimes we talk about that here, and we talk about that whole almost three-way connection. So we're built for connection with ourselves, for connection that's interpersonal with other people, and then connection with something that's beyond ourselves. And really that's what you're talking about there, is that connection that's with someone that's beyond yourself or beyond the interpersonal.
Yes. And I think that's where for a lot of people they struggle, because I think within humans there's a need for connection with something other, you know, and it's a really deep longing, and until we kind of work out what that is, we can be looking for, you know, that need to be fulfilled in other places that maybe aren't always healthy.
Yeah, and so in terms of that connection with God then, so I know that some of the stuff that you've been around, not necessarily in your training, but kind of has branched off from your training, has been around about a whole pile of contemplative stuff.
Yes.
And that's something that, you know, certainly in the client work that I would do, we would talk about daily practices, because it's important that you actually have some sort of rhythm to life and what that looks like. So I don't know if you can share a wee bit about the contemplative stuff that you've been involved with.
So I'm really I really love meditation, and I love Christian meditation, especially the meditation that's kind of based on the work of Saint Ignatius, and I took a wee course in Take Time meditation, and it was a Methodist minister who had started this, and actually started it because he was doing prison chaplaincy, and he wanted to connect with people that didn't have a faith, but that they could encounter Jesus, and it developed from this. And so in this, it's like you can do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you need, but you're getting guided into this space where, you know, you're having an encounter with Jesus and you can talk to Jesus. And if people don't have a faith, you know, you do it more gentle, you know. But for me, it's like I'm having this daily encounter with Jesus. And just, you know, you just lay things down and ask him what he's thinking, you know, what he wants, you know, and then you get back, you know, and it's just, it's really stilling, you know. Mm-hmm.
That might be really alien to folk, you know, who are watching this or listening to this, because that whole idea of religion and faith seems to be something that's completely different. Because you're talking about a relationship there.
Yes. And I think that's what's most important. You know, that's what, because I think that's what a lot of my ministry's about. Is about connecting people to that relationship with God, and then for people who have that connection, actually taking them deeper, you know, deeper into relationship with God. So that's where I feel my ministry is as well. You know, because that's that's what I think you're needing. It's like to know that you've got a friend that's there that's constant, and it's tapping into it, because so is that you know how you can, like, you know, get that access, you know, because if you don't know, it's like, and actually a lot of time in church, you know, a lot of churches, you know, sometimes people are going, but they're not actually having that personal encounter, that relationship with Jesus.
I suppose it's a bit like knowing how to connect, isn't it? That's what you just said. So, like, if I wanted to connect with you, then I might phone you, or I might send you a text message or whatever. And so I suppose it's God's phone number, if you like. It's how you do that, how you make that connection. So how do you see that then impacting, you know, your mental health and well-being, or the mental health and well-being of other folks that you facilitate that kind of stuff for?
So I think it's really that I think that relationship's really important for your well-being, because to know that you are, because I think it's, people want to know that God hears them, you know, and like God connects with people in different ways. So what's working for me might not work for other people, but I do think that's how I would encourage people, you know. So for some people it's maybe journaling, you know, and it's like just getting it all out on the page, but as they're writing, actually, you know, the answers are coming, you know. So something spiritually is happening there, and you're like making that connection. You know?
And do you see that then, so that spiritual word I think is really important, because do you see people with an interest in the spiritual but not necessarily an interest in the church or in religion or whatever? So what's the difference?
So for me, I don't like to say that I'm religious, because I think sometimes there can be then this spirit over it of, you know, we need to follow rules, you know, we need to have the right theology, you know. It's like, I can't do these things until, you know, so there's like barriers to your relationship with your brothers and sisters around you, but also to God. So it's, you know, being it's like about so I'd rather say that I was, you know, spiritual, encouraging people in their spirituality, because I think you can, I think because a lot of people have been hurt by church as well, you know, and so that as soon as you say that, they'll close down. But if you just talk to them about, you know, making connections, and how they can go about that, they can do it themselves. They don't need to, they don't need to go to church. You know, they can be doing that themselves, like in the house, or, you know, out in a walk, or, you know, anywhere.
And I suppose for folks carrying around those kind of hurts and stuff, finding a way that they can engage spiritually in some way, shape or form to be able to release those hurts actually hugely improves how they feel about themselves and about other people and about the world in general.
Yes.
Yeah, really, really interesting. So and we ask this question to everybody that comes on our podcast, so if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about our culture that would actually impact people's mental health for the good, that would make a huge positive impact, then what do you think that would be? What would you change?
I would, from the time that kids are in nursery and then go into school, I would actually, like, you get like RE, you know, and like religious education, you learn about different religions, but actually I would have spiritual education, and I would be encouraging children, you know, to be able to connect, you know, to the spirit. You know, I would be getting them to be able to voice their feelings, and in how to do that. I would be encouraging them to, you know, learn massage, like when they're little kids, you know, and be able to, you know, be able to understand each other and be able to, like, see that, you know, touch can be a healing thing, but most importantly that create a space and a culture where young people can really say what they're feeling, without judgment and without people trying to fix them, just for spaces to be able to express themselves. Like my son, he has experienced like mental health issues, you know, for actually since he was in school. And so it's something that I feel strongly about, because even though these were things I was cultivating at home, he felt that actually, he's got to project a certain image, especially like as a young man. You know, it's like, it's like, just getting on with things, and I am tough and all the rest of it. Where actually we need people to be emotionally healthy, and know that it's. And actually, sometimes you don't need to just get on with things. This was a phrase that my mum would always say to us when we were young, and that's probably what she was told whenever she was young. You know, it's like, you've just got to get on with it. And you do, but actually it impacts you. You know, it causes you stress, it impacts your mental health, it impacts your physical health. You know, let's just, if we start, you know, people learning about their bodies and their minds and their actual well-being, you know, their spiritual well-being since they were tiny, it just becomes normal. You know, and then you've got actually whole people, holistic people.
Yep. And we do in our culture separate greatly our physical from our emotional, from our mental, from our spiritual. We portion them all out, don't we? And actually, as we see, lots of certainly the research now is showing how interconnected all of those things are. You know, if you hurt my body, you'll hurt my mind, and you'll hurt my spirit, or if you, and vice versa, all of those things. And that's really what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes. Aye. And just for people, you know, so if you understand that from a young age, you know, and I think as well, I think no matter what your religion is, you know, like whatever your faith is growing up, you know, that shouldn't interfere with that, you know, because, you know, God wants us to be whole, you know, wants us to be whole.
But we are different sides to ourselves. We are different parts of ourselves, you know, so the physical and the spiritual and the emotional, or the mental part of ourselves. So we are all these parts.
Yeah.
And how do they all work together? You know, what does that look like for us? You did some stuff before, didn't you? Because you were trained in some holistic stuff before, didn't you?
Yes, I was. So whenever my son was, whenever I'd left school, I was in bands and I didn't quite know what I was doing, you know, and I had did some holistic therapy, and then whenever I had my son, I was doing that as well, you know.
And you must have seen the connection for folks then between kind of body and mind and spirit.
Because what was amazing was how, you know, is you're touching people, you know, and you're releasing all this build up, and they're talking to you, and you're getting things that are, you know, it's this release of like things that have been repressed that has impacted on their physical bodies and also in their mental health.
And I think there definitely is something about how we encourage people to do that and how we continue to encourage people to do that, because you know, within the British culture, certainly within the Scottish culture, it's not, well, we're not touchy-feely, you know, and we'll just get on, as you say. But in actual fact, perhaps we're reaping some of the consequences of that now as well, in terms of just getting on with stuff. So just as we're coming to an end on this, obviously, you know, you were still training through the pandemic and all the rest of it. I've been thinking lots recently about the pandemic, and we've heard lots of negative stuff in terms of it, of pandemic life. Can you think of any gifts that the pandemic has brought?
Actually, for me, I started to really appreciate what I had, and there was these joyful times of, especially like when we were in, like, you know, the really restricted lockdown, and I was only going out to go to the stables and to walk the dogs, and the joy that I took in that, and also like whenever you seen people, the joy of seeing them. And it made me actually really appreciate, you know, what I had in life.
I think that's really interesting. And I suppose that thing too of, obviously you've talked and touched on it a wee bit already about the digital world and still being very much part of the digital world, but perhaps that realisation for most of us that we actually want more than seeing somebody in a screen. We actually want something that's face to face as well. And what does that look like for us as we move forward? Because obviously the virtual world has opened up and we've got access to lots and lots and lots of stuff, but for many of us we really miss the face to face stuff.
Because like I'm a real extrovert, you know, that's where I get my energy from. And see, at the start of the pandemic and the lockdown, like, actually not like the effect that it had on me to be actually not be able to link in with people. And I was doing loads on Sanctuary First, you know, we would have coffee shops and you're seeing people, but it wasn't the same. I wanted to feel their energy. And you can read them, you know, you can learn to read people online, you know, but you can't feel their energy. And that for me was that was the hardest thing. So for me now, it's like, it's so beautiful and wonderful to actually be in rooms with people and just soak up that energy and just be like, it's such a joy. Such a joy.
Fabulous. What a great place to leave it. Thanks so much for coming in and talking with me this afternoon. If folks want to get in touch with you and they want to find out a bit more about you or about White Inch, they can do that via White Inch Church, yes?
Yes, they can. Yes.
So there's a White Inch Church Facebook page.
There's
a public one, and there's also the White Inch Church website that they can get in touch with, email addresses and stuff.
They can send a wee message there, and they can also see me on Sanctuary First as well.
Fabulous. So on various platforms coming straight down a digital cable to you anywhere. Okay, fabulous. Thanks again, we really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us. We have appreciated Laura being here, and we appreciate your company too, and we hope to see you next time.